Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jamison Cable, and I'm joined again with David Kirkpatrick. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You?
Doing good. We're plugging through. Again, sometimes I date these things. Sometimes I completely forget. But it's November 30th, 2023. You will probably be hearing this in 2024. So, not that really matters. But we got more Kentucky history coming. We are bringing back the Constitution. It's the return of the Constitution. We're going to wrap it up with this one. This is the first Kentucky Constitution written before the Kentucky became a state and was established. It became in effect. Some pretty interesting stuff. But we're going to jump in. We've already covered the first 10 articles, and we're going to do Articles 11 and 12. But something to be thinking about once we kind of get to the end of this one. What was something that really kind of was unique, I guess, about the first Constitution that you can be thinking about that there, David. Anything before we get started, I guess?
It's just a lot of the things we've talked about. I think people would be really surprised at how many layers there were to elect like senators and the governor initially.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, today it's all about popular vote. That really sticks out, I think, more than anything to me. But yeah, there was quite a bit.
Yeah. And if you want to get those reviews and you've not listened to the first two, go back a few episodes and we'll catch you up real quick. But let's look at Article 11, which outlines the process of amending or changing the Kentucky Constitution. And we all know, just from current politics, that's a tough thing to do, nationally and even at state level. But in the general election of 1797, citizens eligible to vote for representatives will also vote by ballot to either support or oppose the convening of a convention to amend or change the Constitution, which right here jumps out and pretty much says, if we screwed it up, you got a chance to let us know and we'll fix it.
It sounded like there was a lot of confidence there.
Yeah. Which, makes sense too. This is the first go around starting a new state. A lot of the states at this point, even the first 13 in Vermont being the 14th, those are pretty new. I mean, they're not old at this point. They're no more than, a decade at the most old, maybe a little bit different, depending on certain times, I guess. But still, it's a process. They're learning.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people don't think about is they rewrite their constitutions, even if they've been colonies and had a charter or something. You have to write the king out of that. So you're right. Mm-hmm. All state constitutions are just about a decade old.
Yeah. If a majority of all citizens voting for representatives in the state vote in favor of a convention, a similar ballot will be taken the following year. It's funny reading this, and we know what happens. There's another constitution made. Right. If in the subsequent year a majority of citizens voting for representatives still support a convention, the General Assembly will call a convention. The convention will consist of the same number of members of the House of Representatives chosen in the same manner and at the same time as the representatives are elected. So pretty much this is going to happen. The convention will convene within 3 months after the election, and to discuss any kind of readoption, amendments, or complete change in the Constitution. and so forth. If in either of the 2 years the majority of the citizens voting for representatives does not support the convention will be called unless 2/3 of both branches of the legislature find it expedient to do so. Which I kind of wonder, which we'll get to this eventually, how it went. I assume that the representatives, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it worked that way. If the people voted yes, we want to change, yes, we want to change, or maybe they did yes and no, and then the branches were like, yeah, we want to go ahead and do this. Um, Interesting. We'll get. I
That's
guess we'll get to that down the road. Down the road.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's fascinating to think that they were, like we said, that unsure of it from the very beginning. But and of course, Article 12 shows another development and a change from the original Constitution. So we think of the Bill of Rights, and they come along, several years after the Constitution's passed. So in Article 12 here, it outlines a series of fundamental principles and rights, which is basically Kentucky's version of the Bill of Rights. It talks about equality, that all men are created equal when forming a social compact, and no one is entitled to exercise public emoluments or privileges without providing public services. So you're not supposed to be able to get by on your good name. You have to have done something for the state in order to receive any kind of accolades. It talks about popular sovereignty, that all power is inherent in the people, and governments exist to serve them, and peace, safety, happiness. That's the core goals of the Constitution. So we hear a little bit of the preamble, at the national level echoed there. But citizens have the right to alter, reform, or abolish their government in any manner they see fit. Talk about a wide open problem. Maybe in a lot of ways. So that's interesting. And then we see some other things that are kind of familiar to us. Freedom of religion is addressed in the Kentucky Constitution. All individuals have the right to worship Almighty God according to their own consciences, and no one can be compelled to support any place of worship against their consent. Religious freedom is protected, and no religious group is meant to receive preference under the law in any way, shape, or form. So, again, echoing that constitutional amendments that were added to the federal Constitution in 1789, and so they're really concerned about preserving the rights of the individual. In terms of civil rights, we think of that in the modern context, often with desegregation and those sorts of things. Back then, they just meant for the average person, the average voter, the rights and privileges of our citizens are not to be affected by their religion. And that might sound strange to a lot of people, but there were some states who would try to disenfranchise Catholics or other groups. And Kentucky is trying very hard to make sure that everyone is equal regardless of their beliefs. All elections are supposed to be free and equal. I mean, yeah, do you need to write that part down? I mean, hopefully that's implied. But they do mention trial by jury. The right to trial by jury is to be maintained in the Commonwealth. That's pretty standard stuff. Freedom of the press is a big deal. Printing presses are free, and citizens can speak, write, or print freely, though they are responsible for any misuse of this liberty. So slander and libel and those sorts of things are still, kind of being reserved there. If you do commit libel, or you're investigating the conduct of public officials, the truth of the matter may be given in evidence. So, if you're taken to court for libel, the truth may be cited. You can't say, well, this is really private. I want to keep it to myself. Everything is to be laid bare. So it's very telling that Kentucky goes through this much effort to preserve these rights. We see, again, protection from unreasonable search and seizures. So people are supposed to be secure in their persons and their houses, their possessions, and any unreasonable searches are forbidden. So it even goes down to the rights of the accused, which is something we don't quite get into in the federal Constitution. Anyone accused of a crime has the right to be heard. We talked about that earlier with a jury, to know the nature of the accusation, to confront the witnesses. That's kind of interesting. And to have a speedy public trial by an impartial jury. They cannot be compelled to testify against themselves. So what we would think of as pleading the fifth in the federal sense, we see here in Kentucky. And
That's, so the accusation, the thing that pops out to me, to know the nature of the accusation, to confront witnesses. Is that, I mean, is that normal now too? I mean, are they able to question witnesses? Is that basically what it is?
yeah, I've wondered, is that, surely that's what it means, that you have the right to cross-examine. And it seems like it's so embedded, you would think it's obvious. But I guess I can see a scenario where before the revolution, the crown says this guy's going to provide evidence against you. You don't have any right to say anything. You're just going to sit and listen. So I think you're probably right.
Well, yeah, and that's probably what it comes from, is like that the king's way or no way kind of, attitude prior
Right.
to the revolution. So that's probably that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's interesting the way they word it, though. It's so strongly worded. But um, so yeah, that no double jeopardy. So if anybody doesn't know what that is, if you've been tried of a crime and found not guilty, you're not going to be tried again. Protection of your property. Your property should not be able to be taken without your consent or just compensation. Um, Other things like access to the courts. All courts are supposed to be open to all individuals. Again, something we kind of take for granted. Um, but you have the right to seek a remedy for injury. In other words, you have the right to sue if you think someone's done you wrong, whether it's involving lands, goods, harm to your person, even harm to your reputation, which is a big deal in
Hmm.
the 19th century. That's when we see a lot of duels and things.
Yeah, the duels.
Yeah. Um, no suspension of the laws should be exercised except by the legislator, and that's kind of a crucial point. And this is something we still, debate in Kentucky today about how much in a disaster, if a tornado hits, and an area is pretty devastated, how much power does the governor have versus the legislator? And there are still debates on that. So they address that here. That in the 1792 Constitution, it's the legislator that's able to do that. No cruel punishments, pretty standard, but they kind of lay it out. Excessive bail, fines, things like that are also in that same category. It addresses the right of habeas corpus. Prisoners are bailable. In other words, you can be bailed out, and the writ of habeas corpus cannot be suspended except in cases of rebellion or invasion. So again, that's fairly standard language from the federal Constitution. Um, there are limitations on imprisonment for debt, and Kentucky would have a huge problem with this in a
Hmm.
few decades. But debtors cannot be imprisoned except for the strong presumption of fraud, which is pretty different than a lot of places. No ex post facto laws or impairments of contracts uh, are to be made. No attainder of the legislator, which means that no person can be attainted of treason or felony by the legislator. Uh, and there's no corruption of blood or forfeiture beyond the offender's life. So the attainder will not corrupt the blood or cause forfeiture beyond the offender's life. So I assume by that they're meaning you can't pass this crime on to the next generation. Is that how you
Hmm.
understand that?
I would think so. Yeah, once because it even says, natural death. So, I mean, that's what kind of I would think, that means you can't go on.
Yeah.
Your
That,
your your crimes die with you. Because again, that might be a king thing back in, you inherited your, you know father's wealth, but you also inherited your father's debt and stuff, and
right.
like, those people, and that might be a little bit farther back timeline, but still, that's, I mean, something that could happen, I guess.
Yeah, they're very concerned about that. And even today, it seems like a given today, but how many court cases go on over estates and those sorts of things where people
Oh
are
yeah,
after that? So,
yeah.
and speaking of estates, the handling of estates and certain deaths, the Constitution addresses that. So we're getting really specific here. But the estate of a person who commits suicide um, shall be descend or vested as in the causes of a natural death. So in other words, your estate can't be seized because of suicide. So there's no forfeiture of your estates due to accidental deaths either. So no matter what happens, or whatever the cause of your death is, the laws are supposed to be respected and how that's parceled out to your beneficiaries. The right to bear arms, of course, is listed in the Kentucky Constitution, 1792. The right of citizens to assemble and petition the government is a big deal, and this already had a history in Kentucky as far back as the pioneer period. They're sending petitions to Virginia. It was very important that their voice was heard. So when they're forming a state government, that gets tucked in there as well. So do we keep going, or do you want to hop in there?
I can I can hop in.
Right, go for it.
That is a lot. The Article 12 is a long one. There's a lot, but it's funny how, or not funny, I guess, but unique how it is basically almost a uh, regurgitation in some parts about from the federal level, and you have that today too. There'll be a law passed federally, and then the state will basically copy that same law and so forth. And I guess, but yeah, I say that, and I immediately start thinking, well, that doesn't. If it's a federal law, the state law really doesn't have to even be made because it's federal. But um, there are those incidences, I guess, as well. But yeah, the standing army, they have a limitation on standing army. No standing army shall be maintained in times of peace without legislative consent, and the military must be subordinate to civil authority. So uh, I guess that's more on, and we're going to get into this, the housing soldiers and that kind of stuff. The colonists were not happy about with the British and so forth, which goes right into the next one, protecting the quartering. Soldiers cannot be quartered in private houses without the owner's consent, and in times of war, their quartering will be as prescribed by law. So again, another, in a way, copy of the national standard at the time. A prohibition of titles of nobility. The legislator cannot grant titles of nobility or hereditary distinction, and no office can be held for a longer term than during good than during good behavior, of course. Uh, but again, that's another instance of the English rule being put down. We're not doing things by nobility. The right of immigration from the state cannot be prohibited. Inviolable principles. These principles are fundamental. Well, let me go back to the immigration. That was one of them. Inviolable principles. These principles are fundamental and shall remain inviolate. Inviolate. Any laws contrary to these principles or the Constitution will be void. Basically, saying that the state law trumps any kind of local laws. Um, and so forth. Uh, so pretty interesting. Article 12 basically is a lot of the same things you get from the Bill of Rights and those sorts of things. These kind of um, personal people rights that a lot of those are still very valid today. I don't reading through those, I don't think there's too many that people don't have today that aren't similar in
Right.
some sort of way. Um, but moving on to the schedule. The schedule of the Kentucky Constitution includes provisions to facilitate the transition to the new government. So now this is probably does not really connect it to anything modern or anything. This is just building up. This is what we're going to do as we go forward. This is how the government is going to proceed, and a lot of this is just basically rules to go by and so forth. So. The continuation of rights, all rights, actions, prosecutions, claims, and contracts of individuals and corporate entities will continue unaffected by the establishment of the new government. Kind of trying to, you know, keep themselves in good standings. It's not going to be, oh, we're a new government now. We own this part of this land or anything, or we kind of can control some of the things. Everything that was established before remains the same when it was Virginia, now coming into the new state as Kentucky. So you gotta cover your bases, I guess. Um, Existing officers, civil and military officers holding commissions under the United States, under the state of Virginia, will continue in their positions until August 10th of the same year. Not, I mean, pretty much saying, "Hey, you're good, but your term's gonna end at some point, and you might get replaced."
Right.
Uh, we're gonna get some Kentucky boys in there, you
That's right.
know? Uh, representation until the first, enumeration?
Mhm. Talk about the
Is that
census.
enumeration? Is that right? I mean, did I say that word right?
Enumeration, yep.
Okay, enumeration. As required by the Constitution, various counties are allocated specific numbers of representatives in the new General Assembly. Um, yeah, I mean, kind of just setting up those who's going to represent who. The inauguration of the General Assembly. The General Assembly is scheduled to convene in Lexington on the fourth day of June, following the establishment of the state government. So, June 1st is when the Kentucky began a state. June 4th is when the legislature is going to meet. Kind of odd that they weren't like, hey, June 2nd, we're hitting this running, but maybe maybe just giving a little travel time, I guess. I don't know. So again, in this, a lot of these schedules are basically beginning when Kentucky takes over the power from Virginia or whatever Virginia has uh, in order and so forth. And I said it because transition to secretary. All returns previously required to be made to the secretary shall now be made to the clerk of the Supreme Court for the District of Kentucky until a state seal is procured. So, yeah, I mean, think about that. I guess that's probably true in many instances. I don't know. I've said that multiple times wrong. Um, you have a new county, or in this case, a new state. Hey, your stuff continues to go here until this date, and I guess it's just a way to give the public a time to change how things are worked, or even give the government time to get themselves situated.
Right.
Because
I find it
if
interesting
you're
they don't have the state seal ready, right? They know this is coming. They're like, "Oh, yeah, we gotta get one of those."
Yeah. We might want to get one of those and a flag maybe too. All that kind of stuff. Um, which that's an interesting story too. The history of the flag, but and the state seal as well. Um, anyway, the seal usage until a state seal is acquired, the governor can use his private seal. Yeah,
Impressive.
who knows? I mean, I wonder what old Isaac Shelby's private seal might have been.
I
Maybe
do too.
Maybe somebody can help us out on that one. Administration of oaths. The oaths of office may be administered by any justice of the peace until the legislature provides an alternative. Um, Probably an issue with manpower there, just trying to get everybody official. Um, then bond prosecution. Bonds given by officers in the District of Kentucky payable to the governor of Virginia may be prosecuted in the name of the governor of Kentucky. Now, so that's pretty much saying that you pretty much you're done with that.
Right.
Um, you cannot send stuff to Virginia anymore.
And one of the questions that came up during the Revolution was, if we win our independence and I owe money to some merchant in England, do I still have to pay them? And I wonder sometimes if that's echoing here through this. People are like, yeah, that bond was to Virginia. I guess I don't have to pay it anymore. I don't live in Virginia. I now live in Kentucky. And they're
Uh,
addressing
a little bit of a hey, I don't know what to do. I can't do it anymore.
money for myself. It's,
You're really twisting my arm here. Well, and then this is going to go right in the jurisdictions for offenses. Offenses committed within the present District of Kentucky or before a specific date will be cognizable in the courts of Kentucky as if they had been committed within the state. So, don't get that freedom.
no,
You know, I committed this crime when this was Virginia. I should be clear. But now they're going to get there. They're going to get that. They're going to throw you in jail if you're committed in the within the state lines or within the state time period, I guess, or whenever. Um, Elections in May. At the elections scheduled for May, the sheriff and their deputy, and if necessary, a justice of peace shall preside. They will administer an oath and affirmation to voters to ensure their qualifications. So there we go. And then finally, commencement of government. The Commonwealth of Kentucky's government will be commenced on the first day of June. So there's the schedule, or at least a lot of different parts.
All right, I was thinking about it, there's a lot of housekeeping things you wouldn't expect, but I guess if you're starting something from scratch, you kind of do have to
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to
Well,
take
yeah.
care of it. And
Yeah.
I
And
thought
that's,
what you said about starting on the 4th, it does seem odd, but I guess if someone has to set up the offices and you've got to buy candles and lanterns and all that,
oh, yeah. Yeah.
maybe that makes
There's some, I guess, cosmetic things we're probably not thinking about. The
that's
things that
right.
just have to get done. Um, but then I even said anything, well, who's doing that? Who's saying, hey, we need this, this, and this, get it ready for us? And maybe
Right.
that's just behind the scenes stuff that's, this is just already happening that they don't, maybe that's a deeper topic to get into. I'm sure that's what was going on, that there was
Oh,
some people organizing things and so
it is
forth. But
interesting. Yeah, like you said, the whole purpose though is just to effect a smooth transition as Kentucky establishes itself and its new government. And of course, we know that the state becomes a state on June 1, but the Constitution is actually adopted on April 19th, 1792, at the Danville Convention. So, the summary of the closing of the Kentucky Constitution and the list of delegates kind of ends the charter here, which is pretty interesting. You get to see who is representing your area of the state, where they're from. Um, but it says on the 19th day of April in the year 1792, and the 16th year since the independence of the United States of America, the Kentucky Constitution was completed. Then it's
mhm,
there in Danville. Uh, by the order of the convention, Samuel McDowell, who is a name still very recognized in Danville and Boyle County, uh, and then Thomas Todd, a good Lexington name,
mhm.
are the
Well,
first to appear there.
and you mentioned it says there's 16 years since the independence of the United States. I guess you really don't think about it being that long of a time, but
Yeah,
that's a good little amount of time that things have happened within, well, not only within the state of what would become Kentucky, but the nation. So a lot of moving parts.
yeah, we think about that today. There are people who are alive who in those days are getting ready to get married who have no memories of what it was like to be a British citizen. Their entire
That's
memories
right.
of
Yeah.
the United States. So it's weird, like you say, to think that much time has passed.
Mhm.
Uh, but and then it goes down. We get the signatures of the delegates, and any specific counties you want to go over, or you want me just to go down the list?
It's funny when you said that. You can see which county or who is representing your county, but a lot of these, there's only, let's say, one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 counties at this point.
Right.
So a lot of these counties will eventually become part of your county. But if you live in one of these counties, then you pretty much got a pretty much direct representation, I guess. But uh, well, yeah, I just kind of think some of the names are pretty interesting. And again, if you're from these counties, you can look them up. Some of them stand out. I remember, or um, it pops in my head. Oh, I know this person from somebody somewhere. I've read about them or so forth. But we can just go through each one of them and kind of go. With Fayette County, you had Hubbard Taylor, Thomas
Mm.
Lewis, George S. Smith, Robert Fryer, and James Crawford. And I say you might know, or I might know, I don't know any of those people right off the top of my head.
I know one of them, and I was doing some research once, and believe it or not, George S. Smith. I had to do like his whole career, and it's fascinating. He was an interesting guy. He was pretty wealthy. He had a little
Mhm.
bit of a temper on him, according to the court records. But yeah, about what you would expect. You can see him pounding on a table there in Danville.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, these are all important, I guess high society people, important people of the time to be representing the people of Kentucky to get it to become a state. In Jefferson County, now I do know some of these people: Richard Taylor, John Campbell, Alexander Bullitt, Benjamin Sebastian, and Robert Breckinridge. Two of those, John Campbell and Alexander Bullitt, eventually have counties named after them.
That's right.
Um, so those are pretty interesting.
An interesting thing about Benjamin Sebastian, he's on the Court of Appeals, which we talked about in the previous episode, is the
Hmm.
highest court in the time and has to resign because he's found to be getting payments in cash from the Spanish governor, the whole Spanish conspiracy.
Yep.
And so, yeah, his loyalties were doubted a little bit. So he has his job on the Court of Appeals. So
Yep. Yep. Bourbon County, we got John Edwards, James Garrett, old number two,
that's right.
James Smith, John McKinney, and Benjamin Harrison. Again, you have James Garrett, Benjamin Harrison, both people that have counties named after them.
Right.
Um, and then going on, let's see, Nelson County, another one of, I don't know any of these guys. William King, Matthew Walton, Cuthbert, very interesting first name, Cuthbert, Harrison, Joseph Hobbs, and Andrew Hines. Any of those ring a bell?
Yeah, I'm afraid not on that one.
No. Um, Madison County, um, none of them pop out to me, but I think there might be a connection. Charles Cavender, Higgison, Grubbs, Thomas Clay, Thomas Kennedy, and Joseph Kennedy. Yeah, I'm going to throw it there. I would assume that Thomas Clay might be a relative of some other Clays that are well known.
Yeah, because Green Clay is alive at this time, so he's there in
Mhm.
Madison County.
Yep, yep. Uh, your stomping grounds. Mercer County, Samuel Taylor, Jacob Froman, George Nicholas, David Rice, and Samuel McDowell. McDowell.
Yep, definitely McDowell. He's the most well known. David Rice is still pretty well known for his role there in the county and his opinions. Some of these though, like Froman, you never really see again in the county. So I guess you kind
Yeah,
of go with Froman.
yeah. Now this one, Lincoln County. Know a bunch of these. Benjamin Logan. Number one dude there. John Bailey. Isaac Shelby, of course, was in Lincoln County as well. Benedict Swoop and William Montgomery. I don't know the Swoop. I've not the other ones I've read about or have well, obviously Benjamin Logan and Isaac Shelby, but I've ran across them in the past. Again, this goes back to Benjamin Logan. Like the whole reason, one of the reasons he moved out of Lincoln County was because he didn't think they would elect somebody else from Lincoln County to be governor. You know, um,
Right.
but interesting. Kind of a unique stand on this kind of that stuff. But moving on to Woodford County, John Watkins. I've heard that one before. I think I've read about him before. I can't put him in anywhere or anything. But then Richard Young, William Steele, Caleb Wallace, and Robert Johnston. Uh, I don't really know of any of their stuff either. Mason County, you got George Lewis, Miles W. Conway, Thomas Waring, Robert Rankin, and John Wilson. Any of those ring a bell?
There are some Wilsons with Herod in his original one. I can't remember. I think it was John Wilson, but I can't remember. Don't know if it's the same guy or not, but certainly could have been.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's not a lot there.
Well, and that makes me want to bring up the people who aren't there, the people who are left out of this. And you kind of think, we did this whole series about frontiersmen, and you know who's not there? Daniel Boone,
Yeah.
Simon Kenton, James Knox. Even though James Knox would probably, he was probably still in the state. I mean, because he ends up marrying Benjamin Logan's wife and stuff, when after Benjamin Logan passes away. So he would be involved, I would think, in some sort of manner. John Floyd died.
Right.
There was others, of course, that died. No Skaggs. There's a whole list of people that are like, well, that are, and again, that's the whole thing of a changing of the tides. We're moving out of this frontier wilderness to an actual state.
Of course, no James Herod also.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. He kind of vanished there right around this time. Now, was it before? It was before the state, right? Or
Yeah, just barely. He disappears. He's at some of the conventions. Kentucky has a million of them for statehood,
yeah,
but he disappears in February of '92, and they sign this in April, so he barely misses it.
yep. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the Constitution. It is the first. That's the first Constitution. Um, Pretty good. Pretty interesting. Anything that stands out really that blows your mind?
Yeah, just the things we've talked about, and again, it is surprising how much time they spent on the rights of individuals, not just like this is what this branch of government does and that's what this branch does. They really want to make it clear where they stand on an individual. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and especially with what we went over today, just the mirror of the rights of people and all that kind of stuff, really kind of showing their unity towards the nation as well. That we stand with these same principles. Again, you mentioned it before, the electing of the officials that first go around. Electing electors, and then the electors elect the senators and the representatives and the governor. Even it just seems like such a flawed system to begin with. Like, people aren't gonna like this. They're not gonna like this at all. And then the other hand of the, um, I guess the anti-British sentiments in the laws and stuff. And you said it too. 16 years. These people. Some of them people are getting married. They've never lived in British rule or any of that kind of stuff. But yet this is still important to that older generation of saying, "Hey, we are not doing this." So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, anything else?
I think that covers it well. You can kind of see along the same lines the development of the Federalist Party and the Anti-Federalist, or the Jeffersonian Republicans. That split's starting to happen here. And some of those rights that you just mentioned were also jabs at those guys. Yeah, I think otherwise that sums it up.
Yeah. Well, again, if you want to review, go back to the few previous episodes, catch up on that, and you can listen to this one again too if you need to. But yeah, right. More Constitution to come, but not for a while. At least a good 7-8 more years in history time, not in our time. Hopefully we get to it before then. Yeah. But anyway, we will have more New Republic stuff, getting into some more families that got established during this time, and other events, Spanish conspiracy going on, some big duels as well. Those kind of things happen. But anyway, there's plenty to cover. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you. the viewers, the listeners. We want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.